Hello, everybody. I'm Don Mitchell. I'm a grateful alcoholic.
Hi, Don.
I just wanted to say thank you for allowing me to come up here and make a fool of myself. It's delightful in here, Steve, as far as the temperature. I mean, I was in at 3:30. I left Riverside. It was 110 where I was, and so this is delightful. I'm old, as you can see. It's over for me. I'm done. I had a couple of birthdays this last in May. I turned 80 years old, and I'm still working, still employed, and I celebrated my 39th AA birthday. So. I'm not gonna give you a drunk-a-log because we all sure as hell know how to drink and what got us here. I'll give you a little one, Steve. But anyway, I'll tell you what happened to me was I was an illustrator, an artist, and I was born with this God-given talent, and I got through school with it. I went to an art school for a while. I decided I knew more than they did, so I didn't need to be there. And I went in the Air Force back in 1956, I think that was. And when you go, and I was drinking a little bit then, not a lot, but a little bit. But every time I drank, I got drunk, and they gave me an aptitude test to see what I should do while I'm in the Air Force. And they decided that I would be a good nuclear weapons mechanic specialist. If you can believe that one, let the drunk take care of the bomb. But I didn't. But every Air Force base I went to, I became the base artist. And I got through 4 years with all kinds of accommodations and things. And got out of the Air Force and decided I wanted to go into the art business. And I did in Long Beach, as a matter of fact. I got a little job at General Telephone Company somewhere here in Long Beach, and we were drawing the pictures that were in the Yellow Pages. That was before computers or any of that stuff, and that's what I started doing. And then I got into the newspaper business and worked with quite a few of the local papers in this area, and then I started my own business with a partner, and we came up with a new way to do architectural illustrations for builders and developers. This was in the 60s when this place was booming like crazy, and the West Coast was just growing like crazy. And we came up with this way to do this stuff that we could do in a kind of an assembly line manner, and I became very wealthy very quickly. And the more money I made, the more I drank, and it just kind of went hand in hand. For a while, I had the houses and the cars and the family. I had everything going for me, and businesses, and then I started losing businesses. I started losing houses. I started losing cars. I lost everything. And by 1978, I was... Now, in 75, I should have known something was going on. My first ex-wife threw me in a recovery situation, and I ended up at Long Beach Memorial West, I think, going through an alcoholic rehab program. And I didn't know anything about Alcoholics Anonymous or anything else. I did remember that I couldn't drink for 28 days while I was in that damn program. It was a real pain in the ass. But anyway, I hope I didn't offend anyone with that. Anyway, I got out of there and went right back to drinking. The only thing I learned there was they made me go to some Alcoholics Anonymous meetings. And I met all these nice people, and they were all smiling, and they were friendly, and they talked about God. And I wanted nothing to do with it. I thought you were a religious cult, and that you couldn't help me because I was God. I mean, it didn't go any farther than this. And So that didn't really stick with me, but when in 1978, after everything was gone, I had lost everything. The word on the street was Don Mitchell's a great artist, but don't hire him. He's a drunk. He'll never get your work done. And so I wasn't doing a lot of things. And that first ex-wife and my 3 young boys threw me out of the house in 1978 for the last time. And they took whatever credit card I might have had left with me. They took that away from me, and I was penniless. I had absolutely nothing. I had an old beat-up van. You may have remembered, we came from Bellflower right over here. If your car was parked on the street in Bellflower in 1978, I'm sorry. But because, I could not get in that old beat-up van. The mirrors were gone. There were bumps all over it. It was terrible. Anyway, I had nowhere to go. And I went to my mother's couch for a few days, and she was a good alcoholic and died of our disease. My father had died at the age of 47 of alcoholism. So, I came by it naturally. But I moved to my mother's couch, and I had a brother in Laguna Niguel, and he called me, and he said, Don, he said, I know you have no place to live and no place to sleep. I have this empty room in my condo down here in Laguna Niguel, and you're welcome to it if you want a place to sleep. And I thanked him very much and got as drunk as I could to get in that old van to drive to Laguna Niguel, and got down there somehow, and I moved into this empty room. Now I had nothing. Another brother gave me the top part of a box spring mattress, single bed thing, and that was in the middle of this room. And it was a nice new condo. It had beautiful wood floors, and there was my mattress in the middle of the room. And that was my worldly possessions, okay? And I was down there a couple of months, and I'd go out during the day and make sure I could figure out enough ways to get enough money to buy enough vodka to get me through the night, to get up the next morning to get more vodka to get through the night. And I did that for a couple of months. And on May 28th, 1978, I went up to my room and my mattress, and I had my cup of vodka with me, and I set it down next to the mattress. I got on the mattress, and I started realizing what a mess I'd made of my life. I realized I really screwed things up. And I didn't know what I was doing at the time, but I cried out the old alcoholic prayer. I said, God, help me. And I meant it. And I passed out that night. I came to the next morning, May 29th, 1978, with my glass of vodka sitting next to me. I picked it up. I carried it downstairs. I poured it in the sink, and I haven't had a drink since. That compulsion to drink left me. It left me that night. It was gone. So I knew there must be something about this God thing that I had cried out to, but I didn't know what. I just knew that I was going to be sober. And I knew I was coming down from a permanent high, if you know what I mean. And I thought, oh boy, I'm going to be a mess for the next few days. And so I locked myself in that condo. I thought I'd give myself a few days. I stayed in that condo for 3 days, and at the end of 3 days, I'm not shaking quite as bad, And I took a shower. I didn't kill myself shaving. I thought I was doing pretty good. So I picked up the phone and I called central office in Santa Ana. And the fellow said, yes, can I help you? And I said, yeah, this is Don Mitchell. I said, I'd like to go to an AA meeting. Could you tell me where the nearest meeting to me is tonight? I'm in Laguna Niguel. And he said, well, let's see. You're in Laguna Niguel. He said, the nearest meeting to you, Mr. Mitchell, is at the Old Canyon. Well, it wasn't the Old Canyon Club. It was the Canyon Club on Broadway in Laguna Beach. And he told me how to get there, and I thanked him very much, and I hung up the phone. And that night I put on my cleanest dirty coat. I was going to impress the shit out of you guys. And I got in my old van, and I drove down to the Canyon Club, and it was a warm summer night, and the front doors were open, and I pulled right up in front, got out of the van, and the two greeters at the door came running over to me and grabbed me, one under each arm, and said, "Come in and sit down before you fall down." You know? I thought I was looking great, but anyway, so they brought me in and they sat me down and at a table, and the meeting hadn't started yet. There was a fellow sitting across from me, and he leaned over to me and he said, "Well, who are you?" And I said, "Well, I'm Don Mitchell. Didn't they tell you I called?" And he said, "No, Don, they forgot to mention it." He said, "Why don't you tell me about yourself?" And I told him what a great person I was. You know, I told him where my artwork had been and all the money I'd made and all this. I thought I made me sound real good, right? And when I got all through, John just leaned over to me and he said, "Well, Don," he said, "you really fucked up your life." Then he said, "Why don't you get out of the way and let God run it for a while?" And for the first time in my life, I heard that word God and the nasty word John used in the same sentence, and I thought, maybe he's talking about something I can understand. He said he was talking about a power greater than him and a power greater than me, and that's all I needed to know about God, that there was one. And he said, and God's name is not Don Mitchell. That really got me. But I bought it. I bought it that night. I went back to my mattress. I went to sleep that night. I didn't pass out. I woke up the next morning with a call from John. John called just to make sure I'd lived through the night, and he made a date to meet me that night at another meeting. And he did that for 7 nights. Actually, I guess John was my first sponsor, and I didn't realize it. But at the end of those 7 nights, having been to 7 meetings, John said, "Okay, Don," he said, "you know where this program is. If you want it bad enough, I guess you'll get it." And he cut me loose. You know. And I was going to meetings down at the Canyon Club for about a month down there. And one of the gentlemen down there, I don't know if you guys, Edwin Schlegel, if you remember that name, but he was down there hauling us young drunks all over the place, and he took me up to the Friendship Club in Orange. And because I kind of wanted to live in Orange, I had a little job at an agency, an advertising agency in Orange that paid me a little money now and then, and I thought that'd be a good place to stay, and my mother was there too, So I moved into the Friendship Club. Now Ed was in the Friendship Club at the time, and you never can forget Ed Loftus. I mean, my God. I couldn't believe it when I saw him here tonight. It's fantastic to see you again after so many years.
I don't blame you.
Yeah. Now this is my talk, not yours.
Tell him, Don.
Anyway, Ed was one of the old crusty farts that were in those meetings in the Friendship Club. But what happened to me is I got to the Friendship Club and I more or less moved into the damn thing. They had 3 meetings a day and I was going to all 3 of them. And I was there in between the meetings. The club was open all the time. And every time I'd go to those meetings, the older gentlemen that I thought must have had years and years of sobriety, but they probably only had 3 or 4 or 5 years. But they just drove me nuts about getting a sponsor. They said, "Don, you have to have a sponsor." "Who's your sponsor, Don?" "Don, you need a sponsor." They just drove me nuts about it. And there was one fella, at the time he was the president of the club, Ron S. I don't know if you remember him, Ed. But he sounded great. He got up at the podium. You wanted to hear what this guy said because it was just wonderful. And I thought, that's going to be my sponsor. And I went up to him and I said, "Ron, would you sponsor me?" And he said, "Sure, I'll help you." And I thanked him very much. And 3 days later, he got drunk. So I knew my drinker was broke, and my picker sure as hell was. So I just sort of sat in a room. I didn't say anything to many people. I just soaked in all this knowledge that these old farts were giving me, you know. Because if you said anything, they'd chew you up one side and spit you out, And Ed's one of them. But I told you I'd talk a little bit about you, Ed. Anyway, I didn't get another sponsor for a while. I was 8 months sober going to those meetings at the club, and they decided maybe I was going to stay sober, and Vera Johnson and a bunch of the older people got together and had a little steering committee meeting and decided that I would be a good Wednesday noon secretary at the Wednesday noon meeting. And they gave me that meeting, and I think I had that meeting for the first 3 or 4 years of my sobriety. It was great. I loved it. Anyway, I've got this meeting, and every Wednesday, this old man used to come to the meeting, and he was about that tall. He was 83 years old when I met him. He walked up to me one day after the meeting, stuck his hand out, said his name was Tom Culhane. He was a 38-year member of Alcoholics Anonymous, and he was my sponsor. And I said, yes, sir. What else could I say to him? And what I didn't know about Tom Culhane was the Friendship Club's connection to Bill Wilson. And how that happened was Tom sobered up in 1941. And this is in our big book, wherever it is around here. But it's in the preface to the second edition. It talks about a fellow named Jack Alexander that interviewed our two founders, Bill Wilson and Dr. Bob. And he wrote an article about him, and they put this article in the March 1941 edition of the Saturday Evening Post. At the time, Tom used to tell me there were 800 members of Alcoholics Anonymous. I think the book says there were 2,000, so it was somewhere in there. There weren't a lot of people in AA. A lot of people didn't know about AA, and this article came out and was on the front cover with a picture of our book, and it talked about Alcoholics Anonymous. And Tom and his wife read it. They were in Chicago. He was drinking. They sat down. They composed a letter to the Saturday Evening Post asking about this new thing called Alcoholics Anonymous for more information. And the Post forwarded that letter to the New York office, and the New York office made sure the old man got sober. And he used Bill Wilson as his sponsor. So I'm thinking, Jesus Christ, I got it made. I got a guru sponsor, I got God and a guru sponsor. I'm set, what the heck. And we were walking into the Friendship Club one night, and we're going to go in, and Tom was with me, and he stopped me on the way in. He said, Don, we're going to go in there, and there's some sick people in there. And I said, what do you mean sick people, Tom? These people are telling me my life is getting better, and they're showing me how to live sober and everything. And he said, well, they're really nice people. He said, but they have some character defects. And I said, unfortunately, he said, what's a character defect? And he rattled them off, pride, greed, lust, gluttony, sloth. He rattled them all off, and I said, Jesus Christ, I didn't realize they were that sick, Sure glad it missed me, And he was a nice old man. He called me by my first name. He said, look, asshole. You got all those, and it's about time we got into the steps. But he assured me that I had done step 1, 2, and 3 the night I got to Alcoholics Anonymous. And after I read them in our book and in the 12 and 12, I realized I had. And we went through the rest of the steps with me. And anyway, things are going pretty good. I don't know, if you remember a fellow named Fred Wilson, who back in the day was at the club. Well, Tom Culhane was my sponsor, but Fred was there at all the meetings I went to and all. So I kind of leaned on Fred a little bit. I remember my first AA birthday, and this is how I learned things. My first AA birthday was on a Tuesday, and Monday night we had a speaker meeting at the club, and there were 100 people. We set that thing up, and we had some great speakers. A lot of people were coming in to hear him. And I ran up to Fred, and I said, Fred, I said, Jesus, don't you think it would be good, in 4 hours I'm going to have a year. I said, do you think it'd be all right if I got up tonight and took a chip and celebrated my birthday because all my friends are here? And he said, well, yeah, Don. He said, I think that would really be nice. He said, you've done a good job. He said, I'm sure you'll stay sober. He said, well, wait a minute. Could you come out front with me for a second? And I said, sure, Fred. And I followed him out. His car was parked right out in front of the club. And he said, get in the car. And I got in the car. He drove me to a meeting in Brea where they didn't celebrate birthdays. Never said a damn thing. Just took me to the meeting. That's me. So I kind of learned you take your birthday on your birthday. Anyway, I was a hard learner. I don't even know why I thought about that, but that's because of you, Ed. I'm at the club and things are going well. I moved. I think I was about 4 years sober, and we had just started a men's the first morning meeting in Orange County at Rubens in Tustin. And I was going to that meeting, and I moved I found a new apartment, and there was a gal that lived across the way in this complex, living with her mommy and her daddy, and she was gorgeous, and I thought, boy, I really like that gal. I think, I was sponsoring one guy at the time. I said to her, I'd really like to marry that gal, but I'm a little worried about the difference in our ages. She was 24 and I was 44. That's close, right? So anyway, this fellow I'm sponsoring, who is still sober to this day, and he's still a smart ass, but he said to me, he said, well, Don, did you ever stop to think she might be the mature one in the relationship? Anyway, I took her captive, we got married, and I fell over 8 months later with my first heart attack that I could feel. I'd had quite a few of them before, I guess. I remember that meeting was close to the hospital, and Ed Loftus, I'll think of his name in a minute and I'll come back to it. Chuck Denmark and a bunch of the guys would come up to my hospital room and point at me and say, see, you old fart, we told you what was going to happen if you married her. And anyway, I had my first open heart surgery, and I was home recovering from that when the old man called me. And he said, Don, he said, I've moved to Nagel, and he said, my lung cancer's come back. He's 87 years old now, 42 years sober, and he said, could you come down and help me every once in a while? I said, sure, Tom, I'll do anything I can. And I did. I went down to Laguna Niguel, and they had moved into an apartment down there. And I would help him with his oxygen and different things, and we had discussions. We talked about his death. He wasn't afraid of dying. He was so grateful for the 42 years of sobriety and the life that Alcoholics Anonymous had given him. And anyway, one night his wife called me and she said, Don, he wants to see you. He wants to talk to you. And I said, okay, I'll be right down. And I drove down that evening, and he was in a hospital bed in the front room, and I went in, and his wife brought a chair up next to the bed, brought me a cup of coffee, and the old man could hardly talk, but he whispered to me, he said, Don, he said, tell me about your 12-step calls. And it was really wild, because one of the things Tom had me do when I sobered up was sign up for 12-step calls in central office. And so I'd been on that list for quite a while, but I'd had a 12-step call the night before. And I started telling him about it. I said, yeah, Tom, you wouldn't believe it. Glenn called me from central office, gave me this fantastic 12-step call, and about that time he stopped me. He said, Don, I don't like Glenn. He said, Glenn gets up behind the podium and talks about all the guys he sponsors and everything. He's a blowhard. And I thought about it for a minute. And I got to tell you guys about that 12-step call. It was really a gruesome 12-step call. We went to Huntington Beach. I picked up a friend of mine, Roy, and from the club, and we went to Huntington Beach to save this guy who called central office. And I knocked on the guy's door, and he didn't come to the door right away. And then finally, I saw somebody, stumbling through the door in the little window. And this guy opens the door, and he's drunk. He could hardly stand up. and he has a T-shirt on, and that's it. He's naked from the waist down. And I could see behind him, and I could see the couch with all the bottles and the beer cans and the disaster in the apartment behind him. It was one of those kind of 12-step calls. Had you been on it, you were guaranteed a year of sobriety. So anyway, I'm telling the old man about this 12-step call, and I mentioned Glenn, and he said he didn't like Glenn, and I said, but Tom, I said, Glenn was doing exactly what Glenn should be doing. He was donating his time working at central office when he called me. The old man thought about it for a minute. I could see those wheels going around. His hand came out from under the covers. He patted my hand, and he said, Don, he said, you're absolutely right. Glenn was doing exactly what Glenn should be doing, and I shouldn't be judging him. And I left him that night, and he died that night. And I realized he gave me the greatest gift anyone could give anyone on this program. He showed me that I could hopefully stay sober and changing right up to the time I died. I'm sure that he planned it. He was a sneaky old bastard. But I got the message. Anyway, at the time I was art director for an advertising agency in Santa Ana. And I remember going to work the next morning and mentioning to one of the secretaries that my sponsor had died. And she said, well, we think we have there's one of our clients is in that program you're on, Don. Maybe you ought to call him. And this fellow I had talked to years before about a job that we were working on or something. And he was selling real estate for one of our big clients at the time. And his name was Bill Marcus. And she said, you ought to call Bill Marcus. We think he's on that program you're on. So I did. I called Bill Marcus, and I had had lunch with Bill Marcus in the 70s. And I remember Bill had food, and I had my 4 vodka on the rocks. I figured he wasn't my kind of guy. But anyway, I called Bill, and I did what you guys told me, I said, Bill, are you a friend of Bill W.'s? And he said, yeah, I knew him. And I thought, oh, shit. He thinks I'm talking about the guy at the gas station or something. What I didn't know is Marcus sobered up in 1944. And he used to talk about being in the Navy when he sobered up. And he was at the Navy Yard in San Diego. And to go to an official AA meeting, they had to drive all the way into Los Angeles to an old hotel in LA where they had a meeting. And I guess they started up at about 45 along the coast. But anyway, Bill Marcus became my second sponsor. He was a great man. He was always there for me if I needed him, and I try and do that for the guys I sponsor today. Bill Marcus was Bob Hope and Bing Crosby's drummer in the big band era in the 40s. And his claim to fame was Bing Crosby, they had a show one night at the Coconut Grove, and then the whole band went with Bill, and they came down to Long Beach, and they all somehow, drunk, signed up for the Navy. Well, the next morning, the wives started calling Marcus saying, hey, will you call your friend down there at the recruiting office and get these guys off the hook? We have to play tonight. And Bing Crosby remembers that Marcus volunteered his whole band for the Navy. Anyway, the guy at the recruiting office said, well, it'd be nice if we could do that, Bill, but there's a war going on and we need them, so just tell them to come on down. They don't need their toothbrush. Anyway, when Bill had his 40th AA birthday, this was back years ago, he got 2 calls that I remember. I was there the night he got them, and one was from Bing Crosby, and the other was from Clancy. So Bill was a great guy. He died in 1992. He had 48 years of sobriety. And he had a meeting in his house every Sunday night. And it was people that he sponsored. He sponsored some admirals, and I think he sponsored an astronaut. And he sponsored a lot of people along the coast. And they used to come to this meeting on Sunday night, and they'd just go around the room and everybody kind of bring everybody up to date on what was going on with them. And Bill asked me to come to it, and I did from the 87 to about 92 when he passed away. And when Bill died, he had a little sheet that they used as the format for the meeting, and he gave it to me, and after he passed away, I tried to keep it going in a church in Laguna, and it just sort of fizzled. And about that same time, I had my second open heart surgery, and I was home recovering, and some of the guys I sponsored started coming on Sunday night, and that meeting's been going on since 1992 in my house every Sunday night. And I'll tell you one little story about that meeting. One night, there were about 15, 20 people there. And again, we just went around the room and everybody shared a little bit about what was going on with them. And one of my guys that I sponsored had his hand up. He was going nuts. You know, he wanted to share first, you know. So I called on him. I said, Bill, would you like to share? And he said, I'm allergic to Jesus. And I thought, oh, God, it's going to be a long meeting tonight. You know? And he talked about being allergic to Jesus. And then Jane Horton was there that night. Jane Horton had been praying to Mr. Peabody for years. Babs was there. Everybody that was there talked about their own higher power. And when they were all through sharing and we were standing up holding hands, I was holding a hand of a friend of mine, Ed, and we were saying the Lord's Prayer. And as we were saying the Lord's Prayer, I looked over at Ed. I realized he's mumbling a Hebrew prayer under his breath because he was Jewish. And when we got all done, I realized we were doing exactly what the book says. You know, on page 45 of the book, it says the main reason for the book is for you to find a power greater than you that'll solve your problem. And I think we were doing that night. Anyway, to get back to my saga, Bill is gone, and I don't have a sponsor again, right? And about that time, that sweet young thing dumped me. She kept getting younger, and I kept getting older. So it wasn't working too well. And so I remember I ran back to the Friendship Club one morning meeting, and I stuck my hand up. Poor me, my marriage at 10 years is over. I spent the night in a motel. And some guy in the back of the meeting, probably you, Ed, said, boy, was she a slow learner. Anyway, and then some fella shared in that meeting that he just stopped in. He had a year of sobriety. He stopped in to get everybody's name and address because he wanted to make sure that he could write to them because he was going to jail for a year for something he had done while he was drinking. And when he got through sharing, I realized I didn't have a problem in the world, but I did need to go to more AA meetings. And I made a vow then that I was going to go to a meeting a day for the rest of my life if I could, and I pretty much do, folks. I pretty much do. I needed a new meeting, so I thought, well, hell, I'll go back down to the Canyon Club. I hadn't been down there in years. And so I drove down to the Canyon Club on a Monday night and went into a Monday night men's stag. And there was this old geezer in the corner, and I figured he must be the guru of the bunch. So I went over to him and I introduced myself, and his name was Joe Quinn. And I introduced myself and I said, Joe, I'm Don Mitchell. I said, maybe you knew my sponsor, Bill M. from Newport Beach, who just passed away. And he said, you mean Marcus? And I said, yeah. He said, well, yeah, Bill helped me get sober when I got here. And I said, oh. I said, well, you never met my first sponsor, an old man named Tom Culhane, came out here from Chicago because of his emphysema. And he said, of course I knew Tom. He said, Tom moved to Laguna Niguel before he died. And he used to come in here to the Canyon Club, and we'd sit around and talk about Bill Wilson and the old timers. I said, oh. And after that meeting that night, Joe got me off to the side and he said, Don, he said, where can you go that you haven't been in 6 or 7 years and run into a fellow that knew both your sponsors intimately? He said, do you possibly think somebody else is running this show other than you or me. And I thought, I like the way that man thinks. And I asked Joe to be my sponsor, and Joe was until we lost Joe in 2000. And he was 48 years sober. So I was sponsorless again. I finally got another sponsor. I had Joe Millard for a while, and then Joe passed away. And then I had, gosh, I can't remember now. I had a couple of more sponsors, and they kept dying. It doesn't pay to be my sponsor. If I ask you to be my sponsor, say no. Anyway, I sponsor a lot of people. I sponsor a priest. And I met Father Dan at the Canyon Club years ago. And he asked me to help him, and I said, sure, Dan, I'll do anything I can. And then Dan moved to a parish up in somewhere in Northern California. And they asked me to be the 1999 Orange County Convention chairman. And when they did, I called Father Dan. I said, Dan, could you come down and do the opening, a little opening prayer for the opening meeting and say something over the banquet and all, and, with your collar on, I think it'd really be great. He said, oh yeah, Donnie, I'd love to do it. He said, but if I do, he said, I want to play golf in the golf tournament on Friday. I said, well, yeah, don't worry, Dan, I'll fix it up, So he came down, did a great job at the convention. And that night after the banquet, Leslie, my almost wife at that time, and I are walking around glad-handing people. There was about 3,000 alcoholics running around. And one young kid ran up to me that I recognized from a meeting I went to at Hogue or someplace. And he ran up to me and he said, Don, do you know that priest? I said, well, yeah, I'm his sponsor. And he said, whoa, I got to tell you, he said, we were playing golf in the foursome behind his foursome. And he said, on the 9th hole, he missed a putt, and he ran off to the side of the green, and he said, fuck. So what do you think, Don? I said, I think he's human. I'll tell you one other little quick, what'd you say, 8:20? 8:25, I got time. One other Father Dan stories. I'm at home working on my computer and trying to do a little drawing for a friend that I needed my 1/4-inch scale ruler for, and I couldn't find it. I was just going nuts trying to find this ruler. I went through the house, I went through my car, I couldn't find it, and I can't find it. And about that time, Father Dan calls and he said, Don, he said, I need to talk to you. And I sat down at my computer and I said, sure, Dan, what do you need, And he talked to me for 20 minutes about all the things that was going on in his life and all the, changing, going up to Northern California and all. And when he got all through, he said, what do you think, Don? And I said, well, Dan, I said, why don't you get down on your knees and ask God to help you get through this? He said, that's a good idea. I'm going to do it as soon as I get off the phone. I'm telling this to a priest, right? And we got through talking, and I hung up the phone. And then I go right back to trying to find this damn ruler. I couldn't find this ruler anywhere, and it hit me. Wait a minute, Mitchell. You just told Father Dan to ask God for help. Why don't you, So I did. I got off my chair in front of my computer. I got down on my knees, and I said, God, help me find this damn computer. And while I was down there, I could see it. I continue to get all the help I need from a power greater than me on a daily basis. Let's see, I have a couple of minutes more. I'll tell you. In my drinking days, one of the things I did was I ran to Phoenix, and I just dropped everything. I had a pocket full of money from a job I had just finished, and I flew to Phoenix, and I never came back. I flew my wife over, my kids at one point, and I said, now go home, close the business, sell the house, I'm staying here. And I stayed there and I continued to drink. And I conned a builder over there into building me a beautiful custom home. And so this guy did, and I had this home and all. And I had a lot of amends to make in Phoenix when I got sober. So at a year and a half sober, I'm doing my 9th step, and I thought I better get to Phoenix and make the amends I need to make. And I flew over to Phoenix. I'm now looking pretty good. I got a new suit on, you know, I rented a car. I drove around, I made the amends I could make. But nobody said to me, Don, you look wonderful, you look fantastic. I wasn't getting it, you know, and I'm thinking, God, what am I going to do? I need that shot in the arm. And God's listening to this whole thing, right? Well, anyway, I decided I'll drive out to the house I had built in Glendale. And I did. Drove out there, and I'll be damned if the guy that lived next door to us still lived there. You know, I thought, this is my chance. You know? So I went up to the front door, and I knocked on the door, and the guy came to the door and he said, yes, can I help you? And I said, Jim, it's me, it's Don Mitchell, don't you recognize me? He said, Don, you look wonderful. He said, my God, come in the house, my wife Mary won't believe it's you. And I'm thinking, this is what I came for, right? You know, strutting in the house. And we get to the kitchen, and Mary's sitting at the kitchen table, and she looks up at me, and she said, my God, Don, you look wonderful. What happened? And I said, about a year and a half ago, I found out I was an alcoholic, and I quit drinking. And she said, shit, we could have told you that 3 years ago. Well, if that wasn't enough, she said, wait a minute, let me call the kids. Now, these kids grew up with my kids while we were in Phoenix. And she calls the kids in from the backyards, and the kids come in, and they say, yeah, Mom, what is it? She said, look who's here. And the kids said, we don't know who that is, Mom. She said, well, picture him 100 pounds lighter, or 100 pounds heavier, and the kids said, we don't know who this is, Mom. She said, well, picture him in an old dirty bathrobe with a glass of vodka in his hands, and the kid said, Mr. Mitchell. So I got exactly what I needed, another nudge from God. And I continue to get them, and it's because of this program, and it's because I don't drink one day at a time. You know, my life has become great. And I married Leslie Launders, if you remember who that was. The good-looking little gal that's running around the club.
No, I don't remember her.
You will. I'll show her your picture. Show you her picture. Anyway, she's gorgeous, right? And that's why I'm still working. They're expensive, but we've been doing pretty good. We'll be married 18 years here. Yeah, I like to tell people I've been married 55 years to different people, but I appreciate you asking me down to speak tonight, and I want to tell you that this thing does work. If it can work for me, it can work for you. Thank you.